need a volunteer. Someone to pass this out. Little handouts. I need someone. All right, Josiah, how about you come up here? All right, so I have handouts that I want to pass out. I didn't pass these out earlier because I didn't want to be distracted. Yeah. And so it's a little sheet, little application section, and all the Bible verses that we're going to look through today. And there's a little space at the bottom if you want to take notes, if you don't have anything else to take notes on. And the reason why I didn't want it to be distracting is because the topic of today's sermon is called Let's Talk About Sex. And let's talk about sex. And so the idea, the thought from this, I believe came from God. He stirred my heart about this, and it's been on my mind for quite some time. And I feel like in the church, we are sexually repressed. We don't like to talk about it a whole lot. When we do, we just kind of want to speak put it in negative terms. Don't do it before marriage. Bad things can happen. And with our culture being the way it is, it's saturated in sex, it's pervasive in everything we do, that many of us deal and struggle with it, or are not informed by it, and so since the church doesn't really say anything about it, culture goes ahead and does it for us, and it builds a wrong view of sex, not in a way God intended. And so we're not going to be able to discuss the full implications of everything. Simply today is just to start a dialogue. Open up the lines of communication about sex. And so I have a slideshow.
Yeah, you do, but
It's not. Okay. Well, when we get that fixed here in a second, there's going to be a quote from this guy. His name is Frank, and he's an author on this website. And he has some quotes that I think reflect well about the church and their stance on sex. And go ahead to the next slide. All right, so that's Let's Talk About Sex. All right, one more, please. Oh, that's kind of hard to read. All right, okay, so this is Frank talking. Make no mistake, God created sex. But through the years, God's people have allowed Satan to steal this gift without a fight. Next one. I was never educated about sex. I grew up in a Christian family, but my framework for sex was built by my friends at school and the movies. I still struggle with enjoying the fullness of sex today because of the cloud of lies formed during my teenage years. He continues. It is time for God's people to take back the gift of sex. The lies surrounding it are ruining lives and marriages. Next one. Church leaders talk about sex. The situation in our culture is too dire to continue to remain quiet on the issue. A false understanding of sex is destroying our young people, our nation, and our world, and we are doing nothing. And I think that's really powerful to shed light on the church's stance on sex. It is destroying our young people, and as a result, our nation, a generation, our world, and we're doing nothing about it. Go ahead and turn to the next slide. We'll stay on that for a little bit. You can bring the lights up. So I want you to open up your Bible to Genesis 2. Like I said, there's the scriptural citations that we're going to use today. It's on the bottom of the sheet if you get lost. Genesis 2. And this verse is just a precursor, a foundation for the main text that we're going to look at right after this. Genesis 2, verse 20. This is the second creation story in Genesis. And verse 20, we're going to read through verse 25. The man gave names to all the cattle, and to the birds of the sky, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper suitable for him. So Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. The Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed." And so we see God created man, but he was lonely. He didn't have a partner or helpmate, and so God provided that for him through a woman. And it says in verse 24 that for this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And so when we're talking about sex, we would all agree with the foundation that sex is something to be enjoyed within a marriage union between one man and one woman. That's how God created it. We're going to go off that assumption, that foundation. So I want you to turn next to the Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon is Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah. So if you find Isaiah, we'll look back. And the Song of Solomon is an interesting book, to say. There have been three main interpretations, at least that I know of, throughout history about what this book is talking about. And some say it's talking about the relationship between God and Israel. Others say it's about Jesus and the church. And a third option is that it's talking about a loving relationship between a man and a woman and the sexual intimacy that they have. And for some people, that rubs them the wrong way, it makes them uncomfortable. But after reading through Song of Solomon, through the passages we're going to look at in other places, I find no reason why it can't be talking about a man and a woman and the marriage union that God has given us. And so normally, with the foundation we hear from the church, marriage is between a man and a woman. We would all agree on that. And then normally what follows is you shouldn't have sex before marriage. We've all heard that. And I've heard several people ask this, not directly to me, but around. I've heard people say this, and I think my brother may have asked me this once. Where does it say in the Bible that you can't have sex before marriage? And for a long time, I didn't really have an answer. I couldn't think of a place where it explicitly says you shouldn't have sex before marriage. But I think this passage that we're going to look at in Song of Solomon, chapter 8, turn to chapter 8, I think this small passage has some light to shed on the issue. Chapter 8, and we're going to look at verse 8. We're going to read verses 8 through 10. And so here we have a quote. "We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken for?" And so we have this sister figure, so that means the people talking must be brothers at first. And they say, "We have a little sister, and she has no breasts," which means she hasn't matured into a full woman yet. She's young. "But what shall we do for our sister when she does become of age, when she does mature sexually, when she is a grown woman? What shall we say on that day when she is spoken for?" In verse 9, "If she is a wall, we will build on her a battlement of silver. But if she is a door, we will barricade her with planks of cedar." So this took me a little while to figure out what it was saying. And I'm pretty sure this is what it's saying. If she is a wall. Let's just take, for instance, I'm a person, and there is let me move this up a little bit. And there is a wall, concrete wall, from that end of the wall to that end of the wall that separates us. I can't see you, you can't see me. Are you going to be able to get to me at all? No? Am I going to be able to get to you? Is there any way we're going to be able to interact? Okay, all right. So, say there's a wall. It doesn't have to be a wall. But there's a door frame where I'm standing. Door frames are used to go in and out. Could you meet me and I meet you? Yes. Okay, so they say we have a little sister. She's younger. She's not fully mature yet. But when that happens, because it will happen someday, what are we going to say? Well, if she is a wall, if she is somebody who has practiced chastity, who's a virgin, who has not allowed men to be with her, or her to be with men, if she is a wall, if she has kept that out, if she has kept herself pure, then we will honor that, and we will build on her a battlement of silver. However, if she is a door, if she is someone who doesn't practice not abstaining from sex or sexual activities and just allows people to come in and out whenever, well, we'll barricade her with planks of cedar. We're not going to let our sister be given away in marriage if she's a floozy, if she lets herself go. It's not good. And so the little girl, who's now matured into a full woman, she says in verse 10, I was a wall. So we have a wall. She's either a wall or she's a door. She says, I was a wall. I kept myself pure. I kept myself chaste from sexual activities. And my breasts were like towers. So she's fully grown now. She's a fully grown woman. I was a wall. Then I became, in his eyes, as one who finds peace. Oh, that's cute. Then I became, in his eyes, as one who finds peace. So we have this girl. She's matured. She's grown up, and she's kept herself pure from outside influences, from any sexual conduct and activity. And she became, what's the word? She looked peaceful. She looked appealing to her lover, to her spouse who was wanting to engage her. And so, I think what we see here is that while the Bible doesn't specifically say don't have sex before marriage, I think this is the closest thing, at least that I found, that speaks most closely to the issue. That we shouldn't engage in sexual activity before we're married, because it's honoring to God and it's honoring to our future spouse. And so I want you to turn to chapter 5 in the same book, chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 10. And we're going to read until the end of the chapter. And my little subheading says, admiration by the bride. So the bride is going to speak good things about the Lord. This is her speaking. My beloved is dazzling and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. His head is like gold, pure gold. His locks are like clusters of dates, and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water bathed in milk and reposed in their setting. His cheeks are like a bed of balsam, banks of sweet scented herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping with liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His abdomen is carved ivory. I love that line. That's a really cool line. His abdomen is carved of ivory, inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of alabaster, set on pedestals of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is full of sweetness, and he's wholly desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem.
Sounds just like you, Jacob.
Sounds just like that.
Let's see them sapphires.
I thought I was talking. There for a second. No. So we get this wonderful applause of peering on her spouse's beauty. his appearance. And so, next thing we're going to read is the groom's assessment of his bride. And that's going to happen in chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 1. We're going to read through verse 9. Chapter 7. So now, what does the groom have to say about his wife, his beautiful bride? How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your hips are like jewels, the work of the hands of an artist. Your navel is like a round goblet which never lacks mixed wine. Your stomach is like a heap of wheat, fenced about with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like a tower of ivory. Your eyes like the pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabban. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon, which faces toward Damascus. And your head crowns you like Carmel. And the flowing locks of your head are like purple threads. The king is captivated by your tresses. How beautiful and how delightful you are, my love, with all your charms. Your stature is like a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I said, I will climb the palm tree, and I will take hold of its fruit stalks. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the fragrance of your breath like apples. In your mouth like the best wine. It goes down smoothly for my beloved, flowing gently through the lips of those who fall asleep. Another great discourse we hear about the groom describing his love for his bride. So we see in Genesis that God created sex. He created it within a boundary, within certain limitations. We see in Solomon, chapter 8, that we have this girl. She grows up. She abstains from sexual activity, sexual conduct. She's pure. She looks pleasing to the person who wants to court her. And then in chapters 5 and 7, we hear descriptions of one another. It's all beautiful. It's great. And so we see that if we wait before marriage, it's really the best thing that God has intended for us. But, however, just as there is a good side to sex, and even though I have not personally experienced it, I've heard from other people, it's an awesome, great gift. It's great. It's something that God intended us to have and do. However, just like with other gifts that God has given us, it can be corrupted. It has been corrupted. It can be manipulated, which it has been. And we can end up using it in a way that God never intended. And so, Nate, go ahead and go to the next slide. And so there are two things in particular that I'm thinking of, how sex has been distorted. The first one is porn. I don't think I need to explain why. I think we all understand that one. And the second one is romantic relationships. And I want to take a second just to talk about that. Why? How do those two correlate? So, in today's culture, if you love someone, if you're in a relationship with them, some things are just a given. Like, you move in together. That's just what you do. Or you have sex before marriage. You're intimate with your partner before marriage. In fact, you can do whatever you want sexually, and no one's going to bat an eyelid. And so, being in a romantic relationship poses that a temptation, especially in today's culture, because no one's going to be none the wiser if you do anything. And if people know about it, hey, what you do is what you do. And so, how sex has been corrupted, has been manipulated, I picked out those two in particular. Now, I have had struggles with both of these. I struggle with porn, and the reason why I titled it, Let's Talk About Sex. The reason why we're talking about this is, like I said, to open up lines of communication. Because I struggle with porn, and I have, and I was ashamed of it for a long time. And I was embarrassed about it. I didn't bring it up for a number of reasons. But ultimately, when I went to church, no one talked about it. I didn't hear it in sermons. I didn't hear it in Bible studies. I didn't hear anybody talk about it. And when it was talked about, all I got was, don't have sex before marriage. And so this is something I still struggle with. All of us have certain sins that we struggle with. Maybe it's greed, maybe it's pride, maybe it's vanity. But mine is lust. And I'm sure there's somebody in here who struggles with that as well. And with romantic relationships, I had a girlfriend, as Nate pointed out, and we were both Christians. But definitely the temptation to have sex and to do things was definitely there. It didn't matter that we were Christians. We're still humans. We're still built, we're very sexual beings. We're built with that desire to do that stuff. And so, even if two people are Christians, and I know there are couples out here, just because you're two Christians, just because you guys go to Bible college, doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen. There's definitely still temptation there, and I feel like I can say that because I've been there, I've done that. And so, go ahead and turn to the next slide. All right. Now, I want you to turn to 2 Timothy in the New Testament. 2 Timothy. And this is a great verse we're going to look at. I have it. I wrote it out and I put it up in our room. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Verse reference is really easy to remember because it's all twos. 2 Timothy 2:22. I'm trouble finding it. There we go. 2 Timothy 2. Now, I have a little subheading right above verse 14. It may be different in your Bibles depending on the translation. But it says, an unashamed workman. Unashamed workman. And the author here, he talks about things that Christians, Timothy in particular, shouldn't get caught up in. And so we shouldn't wrangle about words which are useless and leads to ruin. We need to accurately handle the word of truth. We need to avoid empty chatter. And down on, in 21, he says, abstain from these things. And then in 22, he says, now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Now flee from youthful lust and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. All right, we're going to come back here in a second, but we're going to go to Ephesians 6, just a few pages back. Ephesians 6, we're going to start verse 12. Ephesians 6, verse 12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod on your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, in which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So who are we fighting against? We're Christians. We have enemies. We have an enemy who doesn't want us to accomplish and to continue the work of Jesus in this world. So who is that? Well, in verse 12 it says, it's not against flesh and blood. It's not against other people. It's against the rulers, the powers, against the dark forces of this world, against spiritual forces. Just keep that in mind. I want you to turn to James. James 4. James 4, we're going to look at verse 7. James 4:7 says, "Submit therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And so this is kind of what I thought of when I read that verse. It's like when I'm playing basketball, huh? It's like I'm playing basketball, and I pick up my dribble. I mean, I have a pivot foot, but I can't dribble the ball. I either have to pass or shoot. And so if I have a defender on me who knows a thing or two about basketball, he's going to come up right up on me. He's going to try to prevent me from making a pass. He is going to be all over me. But all I have to do is resist him. I can't move away. All I have to do is just resist him, and maybe I can get an outlet pass. Maybe not. In the same way, we need to resist the devil and his schemes when they come to us. Resist. Don't flee. Resist. Stand firm. Okay, so remember in 2 Timothy 2:22, we are to flee from lust. However, in Ephesians 6:12, we are told to stand firm. Stand firm. Be steadfast against the very powers of darkness that makes this world terrible. Against the evil one himself, we are to stand firm. Put on the full armor of God. Go into battle. James 4, we are supposed to resist the devil, not to flee him. But when it comes to our own lust, we are to run. We are to flee. And the point in doing that is to show just how great temptation is of sexual sin. We have sexual sin, and we have the evil one. We are told to resist him, to fight against him, to stand firm against the very being that made the world the way it is. A terrible place. Sexual sin, run. Run. It's pretty powerful, isn't it? It puts things in perspective. Because, I mean, if we were to run from anything, goodness, it would be the evil one. We're commanded to stand firm against them. But when it comes to our own lust, run. Turn back to 2 Timothy. Turn back to 2 Timothy 2:22. Now flee from youthful lusts, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. And as I was reading this verse a few days ago, I noticed something in it that I hadn't noticed before. And there's a lot of contrasting in this verse. Okay, so verse 22. Now we are to flee. We are to flee something. We are to flee, we are to run from something, and instead, in response to that fleeing, we're supposed to pursue something else. So we're going to flee something, we're going to pursue something else. We're going to flee from our youthful lust, and instead pursue righteousness.
Amen.
And something else I noticed, even more so that I hadn't before. When you're watching porn, when you are engaging in that activity, you're by yourself, right? Either you're in your computer, you're in your phone. When you are in a romantic relationship, and you are with your partner, and you're fooling around, it's just you individually and the person that you're with. Do you think you can withhold the sexual temptation that's there? Of course not. You're going to fall every single time. You're by yourself. You're dealing with a sin that we're commanded to run away from. So instead of being in solidarity by yourself, dealing with this sexual sin, instead you need to pursue righteousness. not only pursue righteousness on your own, but you need to pursue righteousness with a community of believers who call on the name from a pure heart. Do you notice that? Flee from youthful lust. Again, when we think of lust, we're by ourselves most of the time. It's a by yourself thing. However, when we pursue righteousness, we need to do so with a community. You're not by yourself. With those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. So a way to take this out. Find a writing utensil if you have one. We're going to fill these out one by one. There's five responses here. Number one, sex is good, beautiful, and God-given. It is good, beautiful, and God-given. We shouldn't be ashamed to talk about it. Sex is good, beautiful, and God-given. We should not be ashamed to talk about it. As I said earlier, we are creatures, and God has instilled in us the drive to have sex, to procreate. It's natural. It's a big elephant in the room. Why don't we just talk about it? Everyone knows it. Let's not be ashamed to talk about it. 2, being a virgin or chaste before marriage is looked upon favorably by God and honors your future spouse. And when I say virgin, I'm not just talking about physically, but also mentally. And so not only are we to abstain from physical sexual acts, but we need to not look at other people with lust and not watch porn. It's really difficult, but that's what we're called to do. Being virgin or chaste before marriage is looked upon favorably by God and honors your future spouse. We saw that in Song of Solomon. Number 3, we as the church need to open up the lines of communication. How? Through preaching, through Bible studies, and small groups. We as the church need to open up the lines of communication through preaching, through Bible studies, through small groups, and initiate the talk of sex. Initiate it. Don't have a reactionary response to it. Initiate, go out and meet the people, bring it to them, and define it biblically, good and bad. We need to initiate the talk of sex and define it biblically, good and bad. We need to do that through our preaching, through our Bible studies, through our small groups, through one-on-ones with people. We need to initiate the conversation. Number 4, remember to run or flee from sexual temptation. Run or flee. You will not overcome it on your own. I have a really bad track record with that. You will not overcome it on your own. You will not. And number 5, with a culture that is sexually overcharged, the response of the church cannot be anymore not to talk about it or treat it as taboo. Too many people of all ages struggle with sexual sin. Too many people of all ages struggle with sexual sin to ignore it anymore. Let's talk about sex. If the music team can go ahead and come on up. So like I said, this little sermon here, it definitely doesn't cover a whole range of things that this impacts, but I want this to be an open dialogue, to start a movement to talking about sex. We're not having a reactionary response to it, but going out initiating the talk of sex with people, because people struggle with it every day. I struggle with it. God made us to be sexual beings. It's just part of who we are, and to ignore that and to not talk about it, it's really hard for the person struggling in church to find comfort, to find solace. And I just realized in verse 22, when it says we're supposed to flee from youthful lust and pursue righteousness with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart, I can come in off the street and be struggling with a sin that no one knows about, and I can be among the community of believers, but if nobody knows what I'm going through, it doesn't really matter. Because my heart is all torn up, it's in my mind. However, if I join a community of believers who understand what I'm going through, who experienced it, who understand it, who want to talk about it, it makes things so much easier. Let's talk about sex.